Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Homam Jyoti Gamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Maedi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namaha Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is self-affirmation, and we're going to be talking about our true self. The first question in philosophy is always the same. Who am I? And it's only this Vedanta philosophy comes to us from the wisdom of the East that answers this question simply and directly. You are a divine, immortal soul. In the study of Vedanta, this universal religion, it's very easy for us to get lost in the woods of the scriptures. There are so many different books, so many source materials. Therefore, it's important for us to remember that amid all of our studies, we remind ourselves of the fundamental axiom, the foundational belief from which all this Vedanta philosophy derives, and that is the doctrine of the divinity of man. You are a divine, immortal soul. In your true nature, you are not this flesh and blood body, which is born, grows old, and dies. You are not the mind, with its waves of thought and feeling. You are not the role that you play in the melodrama of life. You are not your resume. You are not the person that you think yourself to be. Your personality, your persona, is just a megaphonic mask through which you relate to the world outside. The self is not the body, it's not the mind, but it is the spirit. In Sanskrit, the word for your true self is the Atman. And your Atman is yourself with a capital S. And sometimes people make that distinction. We have to be very careful to distinguish between the self with a small s and the self with a capital S. But really, from the teaching of Vedanta is there's only one self, and that is your true self, the Atman. The Atman is by nature spirit. Spirit is by definition not material. It's immaterial. It's not physical. It's metaphysical. It's not personal. It's transpersonal. These are all a priori distinctions from our understanding of the concept of spirit. Spirit is by definition metaphysical and immaterial and transpersonal. And as the spirit, you are a metaphysical, transpersonal, transcendental being. The the spirit. The spirit is not something that is vague, a vague, nebulous, mysterious, hazy phenomena. The spirit is not something which is maybe conjured up for you in some psychic seance. Rather, the spirit is very clearly defined for us in the Vedanta philosophy. There's no mystery about it. The spirit is just your own self-consciousness. The spirit is the light of consciousness, the light by which everything else is known. And in our true nature, that is the spirit. The spirit is immaterial. It's, that is, material things are all finite. Material things are measurable. They can be counted. The spirit is an immaterial soul. It doesn't have limitations. It's not limited by time, by space, by causation. And because it's unlimited, well, it is by definition unlimited. That is, it's infinite. And because it's infinite, it contains within itself everything. Everything that we conceive of is contained within this infinite being. And therefore the spirit, that is your true self, you are by definition omniscient, omnipresent, abiding in all things, and because you contain all powers within you, omnipotent. And this is the nature of the self. The spirit is, because it's infinite, because everything is contained within it, it is one with everything. The spirit, that is your true self, is defined, ekam evadvutiyam, that is, it's one only, that's a technical definition, one only without a second. That means there is only one being. You are one with God. You are one with the world. God is one with the world. You are one with your own true self. Your true self is one with God and the world. There is only one, only, without a second. And the feeling of oneness, how does that feel? Well, the feeling of oneness is called love. And this universal spirit embraces everything in the spirit of love. There's nothing outside of the one. There's nothing, that is, the one contains everything. Everything is contained within it. It is full. It's full. Therefore, because you are the spirit, you are full. You are fulfilled. Because you contain everything with it, because you are not wanting in anything. Therefore, you have no wants. You have no feeling of lack. You have only the feeling of fulfillment, the feeling of joy. And because that joy is, because the spirit is infinite, your joy is infinite. And that's our destiny, is to realize that infinite joy and happiness. We can never be content with small happinesses. Yo vai bhuma tatsukam nalpe sukamastihi. In Upanishads there it says, we cannot, no human being can be content or fulfilled by small, limited happiness and joy. We seek the infinite. We want infinite happiness and infinite joy. This spirit, that is the Atman, your true self, this is what you are this very moment. This doctrine of the divinity of man It's not a doctrine, it's not about, it's not what they call process philosophy. It's substance philosophy. That means it's not about becoming, it's all about being. You are already a divine, immortal soul. You don't have to become the Spirit. You don't have to change into the Spirit. You're already the Spirit. You're already one with your true self. All you have to do is to understand it and to acknowledge it. That is, to believe it and to assert it, to affirm it, to remind yourself of it, and to stop living in denial of your true nature. And this is our predicament today. This is our problem. This is the tragedy of human life, that we live in denial. And denial means that you know full well that something is true, and yet you live as if it's not true. And this teaching of the Atman is like, that is your true self, is like an elephant in your living room. And yet somehow we live as if it doesn't exist. We refuse to believe it. We refuse to acknowledge our true self. And every day, every moment, we live in denial. We negate, we reject, we move away from our transpersonal self. We deny ourselves. We reject ourselves. And you know how you feel when you are rejected or you are denied that which you want to have. You're rejected by people. How do you feel? Well, of course, you feel unhappy. You feel, this is our condition today. Just as in personal relationship, rejection makes us feel unhappy, so living in denial of ourself is a metaphysical condition. Therefore, we are by nature, that is, we are by nature unhappy. That is, we're not fulfilled because we live in denial of ourselves. The fact is, the teaching of Vedanta is that we need to get back in touch with our true selves. We need to stop living in denial. We need to start affirming the truth of our own divinity. Now, the model in this regard is in ancient times, was the legendary king Janaka and his discipleship with the sage Ashtavakra. You can read about this in the classic Vedanta textbook. It's called the Ashtavakra Samhita. That means the song of the sage Ashtavakra, the teaching of Ashtavakra. And the story is, well, Ashtavakra was when he was even before he was born, when his mother's womb, his father, who was a great Brahmin priest, he used to chant the Vedas, because in ancient times they used to believe that the faculty indriya of hearing was one of the first to develop in the early developing child. And that if you sing or you hear the sacred, chant the sacred text, that the developing child would absorb, would hear those sacred words. And so the father, Kohor, he used to chant the Vedas. And one day as he was chanting, he heard a voice coming from within the womb. And the voice said, "Oh, Father, please stop chanting. You make too many mistakes. You know, it's grating on my ears." So like this, the sage Ashtavakra, when he was born, he became a great sage. But somewhere he was cursed by the gods. He was born Ashtavakra. That means he was born bent in 8 different places. Later he bathed in the river Samanga and he became whole again. So that's the guru. The disciple is Janaka, famous king of ancient India, who was not only a great king, but he was also a great spiritual aspirant. And all his life he did spiritual practices. He sought out teachers and gurus. But he hadn't yet found fulfillment. Finally he came to Ashtavakra and he said to him, you see that I told him his story. You know, for many years I've searched out spiritual teaching. And I've discipled with gurus, saints, and sages, and holy men. And I have practiced many good works. I have prayed to all the gods and the goddesses in heaven. I have said my prayers every day. I've meditated in caves in the Himalayas. But still, I haven't found fulfillment. What is your teaching? This was his question. And the reply of Ashtavakra was Mukta Abhimani Mukto hi Baddho Baddha Abhimanyapi Kim Vadantiya Satyayam Yamatir Sagatir Bhavet. That's the old Sanskrit verse. Sometimes it's good to quote occasionally Sanskrit verse just to show you that this is not a New Age religion, something dreamed up 10, 20 years ago. What we're discussing this morning was discussed in the ancient times. And Janaka, disciple, approached his guru. How can I realize the self? The guru replied to him with those words. And as he says, Mukta Abhimani, that is, if you think you are free, then free you will become. If you think you're bound, then bound you will remain. This famous saying is true. That is, Ashtavakra himself is quoting here from the earlier Upanishadic texts. This famous saying is true. As one thinks, so do you become. So this is the principle. And King Janaka was a fit disciple. On other occasions we have discussed the prerequisites for spiritual practice. And you know that in ancient times they used to have this doctrine of adhikaravada. That is, before you can even hear the teachings, the advanced courses in yoga, whether it be bhakti, raja yoga, karma yoga, or as we're discussing this morning, jnana yoga, before you can even qualify to hear those teachings, you have to fulfill a whole series of prerequisites. And we've discussed those on other occasions when we talk about discipleship. But King Janaka was a fit disciple. He was an adhikari. That is, he had done he'd prepared the ground. His mind was fertile and fit for sowing seeds. And so when he heard the teaching of Janaka, of Ashtavakra, when he heard that teaching, immediately he realized his own true self. And he replied, Deraho niranjana shanto bodho ham prakite paretavantam aham kalam mohe naiva vidambita. He says, he realized his self. That is, a teaching of Vedanta philosophy is that if you are an adhikari, that is, if you are a disciple who's fit to hear the teaching, then when the guru gives you the truth, tells you the truth about your true nature, immediately you'll realize your true nature. Of course, that doesn't happen for us because we're not fit disciples. Well, King Janaka was a fit disciple. And so as soon as he heard the teaching of Vedanta, immediately he affirmed that truth. He said, Aho niranjana shanto, that means, I am spotless, tranquil, pure consciousness. I'm stunned and amazed. He said, all my life I've lived in denial of this truth. And now I realize that it is true. And that's the verse here. That's the beginning of the verses here in the Ashtavakra Samhita. Janaka begins to sing the song of self-realization. The first verse there is, I am spotless, tranquil, pure consciousness. That's the first phrase. You see? That is a beautiful affirmation. That's a truth statement about the fundamental teaching of this Vedanta philosophy. We can see very clearly what is meant by an affirmation. An affirmation is a first person, clear, definite statement of the fundamental truths about who you really are. To affirm anything is to simply to assert positively that it is true. And Janaka, realizing his true self, affirmed its truth, and for the rest of the Ashtavakra Samhita, in verse after verse after verse, we find beautiful affirmations of the truth about himself. That is, he wanted to continue to identify with himself. He was so happy and joyful, he wasn't living in denial anymore. He just went on and on singing the song of his true nature. And we can do the same. The success of this practice of self-affirmation is based on the principle of as you think, so you will become. And let's look a little bit about that. That's the principle. And on other occasions, we have discussed in some detail we've discussed something about the power of thought. And we've talked here about the psychodynamics of the mind and the laws, the science of mind. And we've talked something about the laws of mental science. For example, the great law of impression. That whenever you act motivated by a desire, it will leave an impression on the mind, in the samskara. It will go down deep into, it will mold and shape your personality. It will form and shape your character and eventually your destiny. And we've talked about the great law of correspondence. And that means everything is derived in our psyche and our behavior from our thoughts. Where do feelings come from? Well, they come from thoughts. Begins with the thoughts in our own mind. That is the foundation of our life. That is our belief system. You hold a thought in the mind. Around that thought will form an aura of vibration. We call it a feeling. That feeling will prompt us to speak. And that speech and that feeling and that belief will cause us and prompt us to act. And so thoughts, feelings, speech, and action, by the great law of correspondence, all tend to be to reinforce each other and to manifest each other. We've talked also about the great law of attraction. That is, whatever you think and believe in, you will tend to draw to yourself those circumstances and those things which will enable you to embody and realize that self. And so we know very well from our study of mental science that we ought not to underestimate the transformative power of thought. But the kind of affirmation that we're talking about this morning does not rely on the power of thought. That is, we have to remember that there are two kinds of affirmations. We can speak here of affirmations of intention or affirmations of truth. In the first type, they succeed by the power of positive thinking. And there's a regular cause and effect progression that will manifest our thoughts will begin to manifest and to become embody reality. But in the second kind of affirmation, does not succeed by any causal chain. It works by virtue of simply removing ignorance and revealing the truth that is already there. So nothing has to be produced that is not already in existence. All that needs to be done is to uncover and to reveal what is already there. The first kind of affirmation is all about making your dreams come true. The second kind of affirmation is all about waking up from your dreams. And we can see a big difference. If a poor man wanted to become rich, it would be very good advice for him to begin to visualize his goal, to practice positive thinking, to work hard, to make an effort, to succeed in life, and eventually, through hard work, and through the workings here of the laws of the mental science, he would become rich. But we can contrast that with a different person. That is, we can think of a millionaire. Well, everybody's a millionaire today. Maybe we have to think of a billionaire. Think of a billionaire who he's fallen asleep and he's forgotten his true nature. How can he remember who he really is? Well, I mean, he need not go out and get a job and work very hard in order to become a rich man. All he needs to do is to awaken from his dream. And this is basically, fundamentally, is the practice or the teaching of Jnana yoga. And once upon a time, in ancient India, in a city called Smriti Nagar. That means a city of lost memory. There dwelt a king. He ruled wisely and well. And one day, that king, he decided to go off on a hunting trip. He wanted to travel alone. And so he saddled up his horse, and taking leave of the court and the courtiers, he set off, left the palace, rode through the city gates, rode on and on over hill and dale, through his kingdom, came to a forest, began to ride down this trail in the forest, and unbeknownst to himself, he crossed over the boundary of his own kingdom. He was in a neighboring land now. And as he rode along that trail, suddenly a snake slithered across the trail in front of the horse. And the horse, seeing that snake, immediately shied back, reared up, and threw the king from the saddle. He went flying through the air, and he fell on the ground. And he hit his head, and he was knocked unconscious. And there he lay, and time passed. And when he regained consciousness, he looked around, and he didn't know where he was. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know what he was doing there. He was suffering from amnesia. So he looked down there. He saw his outfit. He was dressed in a hunting outfit. He thought, well, maybe I'm a game warden here. Maybe that's my job. So he sat there that day. He made for himself a little shelter in the trees. The next day, he built a more sturdy hutment there in the forest. And he began to live as a game warden. I mean, during the day, he would go out. He'd patrol the forest. At night, he would come back to his little hut and prepare his food by the fire. He'd cook his dinner and make himself a cup of tea, and then he would go to sleep at night. But every night when he fell asleep, he was troubled by a strange dream. That means he began to dream of a palace. And he began to dream of, in that palace there were many rooms, and there were many courtiers and princes and princesses and a queen, all of them who were attending on the king, who was himself. And then his dream would break. He'd look around, he'd see he was still in this poor little hut, and he'd become depressed. Well, one day a merchant came traveling by that way. And the merchant the king greeted that merchant and invited him in, have a cup of tea. And in the course of their conversation, the king couldn't help but relating his dream that troubled his mind every night, same thing. And the merchant, hearing that, he was like an amateur psychologist. So he thought, oh, yes, I see that you want to become a king. You have an subconscious desire to become a king. I give you good advice. Why don't you become a merchant like myself? You go out you have cloths, you have fabrics, you can sell those fabrics, you can buy, sell, trade. Gradually you can make a lot of money, and you can buy yourself a kingdom. You can live like a king. And so saying, the merchant departed, and the king thought about it, and the very next day he went into town, Try it out. He said, see, when he got some cloths, set himself up with a little, as a cloth merchant. And during the day, he would buy and sell these cloths. But by the end of the very first day, he lost all of his money. He wasn't a very good merchant. He realized this is not working at all. And so he gave it up. He returned to his little hut. Well, time passed. And one day, a soldier came by that way. Same thing has so the king welcomed him in. Yes, come, let's share a cup of tea. He began to relate to him the troubling dream he had at night. And the soldier said, I can give you some good advice. If you want to become a king, the best thing for you to do would be to become first a soldier like myself. If you're a good soldier, you can gradually advance up through the ranks. You can become a captain, you can become a major, you can become a general. And as the leader of an army, you could conquer yourself a kingdom and make yourself king. Well, so saying, he went on his way. And the king thought that was good advice. And so the very next morning, he went into town. He went into the army recruiting office, said, I'd like to join up with the king's army. And the sergeant took one look at him and said, you are too old and fat to be a soldier in the king's army. Sorry, he was refused. So the king returned to his little hutment, and time passed. Well, one day, a holy man came by that way. And the holy man, immediately he recognized the lost king of Smrtinagar. And he said, oh, your majesty, where have you been? Time has passed. And the hunter king, hearing this, he said, your majesty, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Oh, by the way, he said, that reminds me of a dream. And so he sat down, they had tea, and the king related to the holy man his dream, and the holy man kind of understood what had happened. And so the holy man said, yeah, I have some good advice for you. If you want to, there is a kingdom nearby here, Smrtinagar, they've lost their king. Why don't you, if you go into town, you hire a horse with a gold and silver saddle and some retainers to ride along with you. Ride into this neighboring kingdom of Smrtinagar and proclaim yourself the king. And the hunter king looked at him and he said, revered sir, he said, oh, that is impossible. Well, that is, forgive me, it sounds ridiculous. Who would believe, just because I rode in there and proclaimed myself again, who would believe such a thing? And the holy man said, yes, my child. He said, that may be so, but I'm a holy man. And so I am going to bless you. I'm going to bless you with the power of hypnotic speech. And the king, being a pious man, he knelt down before the holy man. And he was blessed with the power of hypnotic speech. So saying, the holy man left. And the very next day, the king went into town, hired a horse with a gold and silver saddle, and some other men to ride along with him. And he rode through over hill and dale to that neighboring kingdom of Smrtinagar. As they crossed over the border, they saw some patrols coming towards them. And when they came within hailing distance, the king, he said, I am the lost king of Smrtinagar. And lo and behold, what happened? Well, all of those horsemen, they dismounted And they prostrated before him. "Oh, your majesty." And the king thought to himself, "Well, certainly the power. What a great holy man. What a great power he has given to me." And so he rode on. He rode through the villages. And as he rode through, he began to see some village roads, kind of a sense of deja vu he began to feel. When he came to the gates of the city, he rode through the gates, saying, "I'm the lost king of Smrtinagar," now with more confidence, now with more conviction. And the people came streaming out, and they laughed, and they clapped, and they were so overjoyed to see him. And so with that power of hypnotic speech, it worked on the king. And when the great white walls of the palace rose before him, his memory cleared. And he rode boldly through the gates. So that's the old Vedanta teaching story about the power of the affirmation. The affirmation of truth. This is the central practice of Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga means the path of right knowledge. As you know, in Vedanta philosophy, our tradition in this lineage is to practice all four great paths of spiritual practice: Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raj Yoga. This morning we're emphasizing Jnana Yoga. It is the way of right knowledge. And the affirmation is the power tool of Jnana Yoga. Each yoga practice uses a different tool. In Bhakti Yoga, the tool is the prayer. That is, it's the name of God. In Raja Yoga, the tool is your own attention, your concentration of mind. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, the tool here, it's a power tool, is the self-affirmation. Throughout the Upanishads and throughout the textbooks of Vedanta, like the one I just quoted, the Ashtavakra Samhita, for example, these are source books where the teachings of Vedanta are explained. Throughout those books, we will find that the teachings of this Vedanta philosophy are epitomized in short statements designed for us to remember. That is, this is back before the days of writing and audio recordings and all that. And therefore, they are full of these great affirmations, these great sayings, Mahavakyas. That is, these first-person, simple, declarative truth statements. And we can use those power tools for the practice of Jnana Yoga. So, let Scripture be your guide. You have your affirmations. You have your affirmation. And the teaching is now that we need to practice. By practice here, in the practice of the affirmation, there is no rule about time, place, or fitness of circumstance. It's simply about recalling the truth statement to yourself. With each repetition, with each recall, you are neutralizing negative thoughts. You're removing and denying false beliefs, and you are affirming the truth. You don't have to repeat these affirmations over and over. That is, you're not doing what in Bhakti Yoga it is called japa. Japa means repeating the name of God, nor is it, as in the tantric form of meditation practice, where you are instructed to repeat a Sanskrit mantra. And if you've been given such a mantra by your guru, it's very important that you repeat that mantra over and over in a regular rhythmic pattern, and you repeat the Sanskrit exactly as it is given. Affirmation is not like that. Affirmation does not rely on repetition. It doesn't rely on rhythmic, some dynamic harmonics of sound. It doesn't come out of that tradition here of the philosophy of sound and language. It doesn't rely, it has nothing to do with Sanskrit or any language. Your affirmation is to be repeated in your own native tongue. You're speaking to yourself. The important thing is not the sound. The important thing is the meaning. And you're reminding yourself of the affirmation is a distillation of all your studies. All that you've learned about the study of the Vedanta philosophy is distilled into that one sentence. And so you're reminding yourself about the truth of your own true nature. And so the idea is that you recall that truth, and as you recall that affirmation, you long for freedom, and you visualize yourself as identified with that truth statement. This practice can be done anytime, in the morning, during the day, in the evening. In the morning, when you sit for meditation, as instructed by your spiritual teacher, that's a good time maybe to, when the mind is calm and the mind is quiet, you can remember your affirmation. And that feeling will remain with you during the day. It's just as if you got up in the early morning, before even the rising of the sun, and you drove some distance to the foothills of a mountain, and you climbed up that mountain. And just as around sunrise, there you are sitting on the top of that mountain. And then you come back down, and you go to work. Certainly during the day, that recall, you'll be able to recall that moment early on in the morning when you stood on the mountaintop and had that panoramic vision. So similarly as during the day. During the day, we need to try to remember the truth about ourselves. That is, it's the most important thing. It's the fulcrum of our being. That is, every moment of every day, we make a decision based on our belief system, which is the foundational based on the belief of who we are, what we are. The teaching here is we need to try to remember the truth about ourselves. Doesn't mean that you have to retire into some closet or into some shrine and sit quietly. It's just like we have to remember, we're like the amnesia patient. We're like someone who's been instructed. If you're instructed by your wife to get something at the store, you got to kind of remind yourself. Maybe you tie a string around your finger, put a little card on your table. It's just that simple. To remember and to recall our true nature. And similarly it is in the evening. in the evening time is a great opportunity for us to remember the truth about ourselves. And after a long, hard day's work, and after your dinner, after you've watched television, you sit quietly and relax into the thought of your true self. What a relief it is. What a blessing it is. That is, the Roman philosopher Boethius' famous book called The Consolation of Philosophy. What a consolation it is to study high philosophy. And the affirmation, that is the great sayings, is the distillation, the essence of all of your studies of philosophy. All that you've learned, all your teaching is distilled into that truth statement, or into those truth statements which you have made your own. And so the last thing before you fall asleep, maybe while you're lying there in bed, you recall to yourself. So you don't have to be sitting in yoga posture with your head, neck, and back in a straight line. This is a different kind of practice. What you're doing is recalling your true nature. And every time that you do, you break a link in a chain. And we've discussed that great chain in other contexts. But you're negating the wrong beliefs. You're chipping away at the false belief system that is the cause of our unhappiness. You're affirming the truth. And the more that we can affirm the truth, we will take baby steps forward toward realizing the goal of spiritual life, which is to regain our lost empire. Om Dyo Shantihi Antariksha Ham Shantihi Prithivi Shantihi Apa Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishwe Deva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Saravam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Same Shantiredhi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal, universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.